Now we have discussed the concept of law of demand as well as law of supply. Now let's apply this. There is a concept called as market equilibrium. In case of market equilibrium, until now what we have done is we have discussed law of demand separately and law of supply separately. That is, we have assumed other factors remaining constant or unchanged. What will happen when the price changes in case of the demand, and what will happen when the price changes in case of supply. But more importantly, we have discussed the law of demand separately. We have drawn the curve of law of demand separately as well as a law of supply curve separately. But in the market, please understand this, the demand as well as supply are happening in real time. That is, there is a demand for goods and services in the market, and there is supply for these particular goods and services in the market. So both the demand as well as supply are happening or are taking place at the same point of time. If you're feeling confused with respect to this, imagine you are a buyer in the market, and in regards to you as a consumer or as a buyer, there is a law of demand. Okay, what you consume, how much you consume, basically is dictated by the price variation in the market, assuming other factors remain unchanged. And if I'm a supplier in the market, assuming all the factors remain unchanged, it is the price which will determine how much I will supply in the market. But don't you think how much I supply, how much you consume, both of them are related in the market? You are demanding the goods and services, hence I'm supplying these particular goods and services in the market. So the demand as well as supply both are taking place at the same point of time in the market. And that is exactly what we are doing in case of the concept of a market equilibrium. In market equilibrium, we are superimposing, or let's say we are drawing the law of a demand or the demand curve as well as supply curve in the market. And if you remember very carefully, in case of a law of a demand, it is a downward sloping curve. And in case of a law of supply, it is an upward sloping curve. The demand curve will keep on going downwards like this, and the supply curve will keep on moving upwards like this. So both are moving in opposite direction. Basic statistics, or let's say geometry back in your high school, will tell you that when there are two lines which are moving in opposite direction like this, one is going upwards and the second one is moving downwards like this, both of them will have to intersect at a particular point. Is it okay? And this particular point of intersection basically refers to the market equilibrium point. Is it okay? The point of intersection between the demand curve as well as supply curve, it is nothing but the market equilibrium point. And the market equilibrium point represents a situation in the market wherein the amount of goods which are supplied is equal to the amount of goods which are demanded. In simple terms, this particular point, let's assume it represents 50 units of a particular good and price is 20 rupees. Is the logic okay? Right? The point which is common on both the lines, the curve of supply as well as the demand curve, I'm assuming that it will represent the coordinates along x-axis quantity demanded is 50 units and along the y-axis the price is 20 rupees. So at this particular point of time, this particular point is present not only on the demand curve, it is also present on the supply curve. Means what? The point which represents the quantity as well as the price is present on the demand curve as well as the supply curve, simply meaning the demand is equal to supply in the market. Is it okay? So understand this. What is the meaning of market equilibrium? Market equilibrium represents a point or a situation in the market where the demand is equal to supply, assuming other factors are not changing and the price is the same. That is, the price which is decided by the buyer is the same price at which the seller is also selling the product in the market. That is, if you are a buyer in the market, if I am a seller in the market, both have agreed that the price will be 20 rupees and I'm selling 50 units of the product. You are buying this particular 50 units of the product. This particular point is called as a market equilibrium point. And anything above this particular market equilibrium point is referred to a surplus situation, and anything below this particular market equilibrium point is referred to as a shortage situation. Now the argument here is, generally in case of the market, we see that there are so many factors which will keep on changing at every now and then. Is it okay? Right? The season changes, the demand will change. The preference of the consumer changes, the demand will change. So there are so many factors which will keep on changing in the market, as a result of which you might be arriving at a situation wherein there is too much of a supply of particular commodity in the market, or you might be arriving at a particular situation wherein there is too much lower supply compared to demand in the market. And these two situations are referred to as a surplus as well as a shortage situation respectively. In case of a surplus situation, what you can see is the quantity which is being supplied is higher. I'll simply write it as Q1 and I'll refer this as a Q2. Is it okay? And if I basically drop it down along this particular x-axis, this will represent the Q1 quantity and this will represent Q2 quantity. So argument here is, in a surplus situation, basically what you will see is the total quantity which is supplied, the supply is much higher than what is the quantity that is being demanded in the market. In simple terms, you can refer to this particular situation as the one wherein in the market, the number of sellers are many, but the number of buyers are fewer. Is it okay? Number of sellers are many, number of buyers are fewer. And as a result of this, there is a higher supply or oversupply in the market. The sellers will compete with each other to occupy or to sell it to the same customer. And one of the ways that they will ensure that they will sell these particular goods in the market is they will reduce the prices. Is it okay? Understand the situation here? I'm discussing the surplus situation. Market equilibrium point is a point wherein in the market the supply is equal to demand and the price is given. That is, the price is the same which is being demanded by the seller, the same which is being paid by the buyer. And in the market, rather than having a market equilibrium, you will also have a situation which is called a surplus situation, wherein the total quantity supplied will be much higher compared to the quantity being demanded. As a result of which, there are too many sellers, multiple sellers in the market, and fewer buyers compared to the sellers. Number of demand of quantity is much lower. As a result of this, the prices of the commodities will start declining. The prices of the commodities will start declining. And that is where you will see the movement towards the equilibrium price as such. And on the other hand, what is a shortage situation? A shortage situation is the one wherein the quantity that is being demanded, okay, the quantity that is being demanded for a particular commodity is much higher than what is the quantity being supplied in the market. There is a over demand or a higher demand compared to what is the quantity of supply in a particular market. As a result of this, there is a higher demand, number of buyers are much higher compared to number of sellers. And there is a competition which will start brewing up. There is a competition which will start increasing in the market in terms of buying these particular commodities, because the supply is limited, demand is much higher. For example, let's imagine you and me are the buyers here, and there is only one unit of a product in the market. Both of us want to purchase it. Both of us demand this particular product. So as a result, both have resources. As a result of this, what will happen is the price of the commodity will start increasing. Because please understand the logic here. Whenever there is a higher demand for a particular commodity or group of commodities in the market, the seller overnight cannot increase the production. Okay, understand the logic here? In a short duration, the manufacturer or a seller cannot increase the production to satisfy the overall demand for the goods and services in the market. So in a short term, what will happen generally in this particular situation is, because there is a higher demand, people are willing to purchase higher quantity compared to the quantity being supplied. The sellers will start increasing the prices. The price will start moving towards the equilibrium point. And that is exactly what will happen when there is a shortage of a supply in the market. So these are the three very important points with respect to concept of market equilibrium, equilibrium price, equilibrium supply, the concept of a shortage in the market, concept of a surplus supply in the market. And as a result of all of this, what will happen in the market? Done? Now, in addition to this, there are two very important terminologies that you need to understand. One is the concept of movement along the curve, and the second one is a shift of the curve. Now, what is the basic idea of a movement along the curve and a shift of the curve? In layman terms, in simple terms, remember this, whenever you talk about the movement along the curve, you are referring to price variation of a commodity. Is it okay? Remember this, right? Why it is referred to like this? We'll have a discussion. Don't worry. Whenever you're referring to movement along the curve, you're basically referring to price variation of a commodity, as a result of which there is movement along the curve. And whenever you're talking about the shift of the curve, you're basically referring to a shift of the curve either to the right or to the left, but because of any other variable which is changing, or any factor other than price which is changing in reality. Now, what is the meaning of this? Let's try and understand. In case of the market, earlier we have discussed the concept of law of demand. Okay, and the representation of a law of demand curve is what? A downward sloping curve. And I've told you, how do we draw this particular downward sloping curve? Which essentially means what? It is a group of points, or it is basically points which are connected to draw this particular law of a demand curve. And in case of a law of demand curve, we draw it based on what is the price of the commodity in the market at this particular price, how much is the demand for this particular commodity in the market. For example, let's say this, let's imagine the price is 20 rupees, quantity demanded is at 10 units. The price further comes down to, let's say, 15 rupees per unit. As a result of this, quantity demanded, let's say, will increase to 17 units. So quantity along the x-axis, price along the y-axis. And the price further, let's say, falls down to 12 rupees, as a result of which, let's say, the demand for this particular product will further expand to, let's say, 25 units. First, what we have done is, we have tried to identify or get the data related to, at a different price level, how much is the quantity demanded for this particular product. And as per this particular explanation that I've done just now, at 12 rupees, quantity demanded will be 25 units. At 15 rupees, it will be 17 units. At 20 rupees, it will be 10 units. So what I do? I will basically plot the graph like this. At 12 rupees, at 15 rupees, at 20 rupees. 12, 15 and 20 rupees. What is the demand? 10 units, 17 units and 25 units. So the first point will be here. Second point will be here, and the third point will be here. So what we have done is, we have plotted this, and now we will connect these particular dots. Although all the dots are not connected here, don't worry about it. This is generally how the demand curve is drawn. Now have a look at this. Whenever you're talking about movement along the curve, you are measuring that in terms of a variation in the price. That is, a movement along the curve is always associated with variation in the price of the commodity itself. Again, it is connected only with the variation in the price of the commodity. The price of the commodity changes. As a result of this, the demand for the commodity will also change. And because the price as well as the quantity demanded is changing, any variation in price and quantity will always fall on this particular curve itself. For example, imagine you are here. Okay, you are at this particular price and a demand for the good combination as such. At price 15 rupees, the demand for the goods is how much? 17 units. Now, what if the price changes from 15 rupees to 12 rupees? The law of demand basically dictates that with the price reduction, obviously there has to be an increase, or there has to be a rise in the consumption or the demand for this particular product. So obviously there is a rise in the demand for the commodity as such. So when the price falls to, let's say, 12 rupee, the demand will rise to 25 units. But have a look at this. The price of 12 rupee as well as the quantity demanded of 25 rupees, both of them, right, are basically represented on the same curve itself. Earlier, we were here, right? That is a price of 15 rupees as well as the quantity demanded at 17 units. As a result of this, what has happened? The price has come down and the demand has increased to 25 units. So the new point of the coordinates or the representation of the coordinates will be a point on this particular curve itself. And the curve in the first place has been drawn by taking these particular coordinates itself. So whenever you are going to vary the price, the demand is also going to vary. And the movement will always be in opposite direction. That is what we have discussed in case of law of demand. Having said so, understand this. Whenever you are talking about the movement along the curve, you are talking about the price variation of the commodity. And when the price variation happens, the demand also should vary. And the new coordinates will basically fall on the demand curve which we have already drawn. And that is the precise reason this is referred to as a movement along the curve. Either the movement will happen in an upward manner like this or a downward manner like this whenever there is a variation in the price. Right? If the price falls down, the demand will rise up, and if a price rises up, demand will fall down. But essentially, these particular new coordinates will basically be located on the demand curve, which is already drawn. Hence, this is called as a movement along the curve. And the technical terms that are generally used in the context of the movement along the curve is that they will use the terms such as a contraction and expansion. That is, when the price contracts, is it okay? When the price contracts, the demand will expand. I can understand this. The demand will expand and vice versa. That is, when the price will expand, the demand will contract. So this is the basic application of the concept of movement along the curve. Remember the technical terms, these could be asked in the UPSC prelims. Now in addition to this, there is also a concept called as a shift of the curve. Now in case of shift of the curve, what happens? In case of shift of the curve, let's draw a demand curve here. Imagine this is a demand curve for a particular commodity in the market, downward sloping. At different price levels, there is a different quantity being demanded. Let's say hypothetically, right, the price as well as the demand combination is like this. If the price is 10 rupee, demand will be 20 units. Price falls down to, let's say, 8 rupee, the demand will be 25 units. Price, right, let's say increases to 12 rupee, demand will be for 15 units. If I draw these particular coordinates, get these particular coordinates in the graph, these will be represented like this: 15 units, 20 units, 25 units, at 12 rupee, at 10 rupee, and at 8 rupee, right? So basically these are the coordinates. Done. This is the first point. Now what do you mean by shift of the curve here? Shift of the curve essentially happens when price doesn't change and any other parameter changes. Earlier we have discussed that the overall demand in the market is determined by various factors. The demand in the market is affected by factors such as price of the commodity. I remember this. One is price of the commodity. Second one is price of related goods. Third one is the taste and preference of the consumer. And finally, right, it is the income of the consumer. So we have seen that these are some of the very important factors which will determine what kind of a good I consume in the market, how much quantity of it I consume in the market. Now, in case of movement along the curve, I'm simply saying it is the first factor which changes, as a result of which you will see there is movement along the curve. Price changes, quantity should also change. But in case of a shift of the curve, the first parameter doesn't change. Is it okay? The first, that is the price of the commodity, doesn't change. Rather, other factors such as a taste and preference, price of the related goods, income of the consumer, etc. changes. As a result of this, at the same price, either the demand for the commodity will increase or demand for the commodity will decrease. Is it okay? It is important. Please do not get confused here. Let me repeat it again. Whenever you're talking about movement along the curve, you're basically referring to price variation of a particular commodity. And when price varies, the demand also varies. Hence, you will keep on getting newer coordinates, which will keep on falling on the demand curve itself. But in case of a shift of the curve, price of the commodity doesn't change. Price remains the same, but other factors which will determine the demand will keep on changing. Let's take a very simple example here. Imagine for a particular commodity that I've written here, for 10 rupee, the demand for the commodity will be how much? 20 units. Now what will happen is, the income of this particular consumer will change. Imagine earlier he was earning 10,000 rupees. Now rather than earning 10,000 rupees, his income will change to, let's say, 15,000 rupees. So when the income changes, generally what will happen? The demand for such goods will also increase in the market. And when the demand changes, the price of the commodity doesn't change, but the demand for the commodity will keep on changing. At 10 rupee, rather than purchasing 20 units now, have a look at this particular new demand. I'll write a short form here, ND, new demand. At 10 rupees, rather than purchasing 20 units, now he might simply demand, let's say, 23 units. At 12 rupee, rather than consuming 15 units, now he might demand 18 units. At 8 rupees, Rather than consuming 25 units, he might simply demand 28 units. As a result of this, the newer coordinates at 8 rupees, the demand will be 28 units. At 10 rupee, the demand will change to let's say 23 units. At 12 rupee, the demand will change to let's say 18 units. The new coordinates when connected will basically give you this kind of a graph or this kind of a line as such. And this is the new demand curve. And have a look at this, what has happened. The new demand curve has shifted to the right of the earlier demand curve. Is the logic okay here? The new demand curve has shifted to right side of the earlier demand curve. And can it shift to the left side also? Definitely yes. Rather than income being 10,000 rupees, what if his income is cut to 7,000 rupees? Is it okay? His income is reduced to 7,000 rupees. At this particular point of time, rather than demanding 15, 20 and 25 units at different price levels, at the same price level, the demand might come down. And as a result of this, you will get the coordinates which connected will give you a line which is to the left side of the original demand curve as such. So the demand curve can either shift to the left side of the original demand curve or earlier demand curve or to the right side of the demand curve. And for different types of the products, these particular demand curves will be shifting either to the left or to the right based on what kind of a factor is actually changing in the market. So whenever you're talking about the shift of the curve, it is because of the various factors other than the price which are changing, as a result of which the price of the commodity remains the same, but at this particular price, the demand for the commodity will change, which will lead to either shifting of the demand curve either to the left or to the right. Now, two very important points here. Is it always applicable for the demand curve? Can we apply the concept of a movement along the curve as well as a shift of the curve to supply curve also? Yes, you can apply it to the supply curve also. But if you understand the concept, more than sufficient as to what is the meaning of the movement as well as the shift of the curve. You don't have to read everything under the microeconomics for UPSC. First point. Second point, is law of demand as well as law of supply always applicable in this particular fashion? Are there any exceptions to this? Definitely yes, there are many exceptions to this which we'll discuss later, right? In case of a law of demand, although I've drawn a straight, a downward sloping curve like this, but in reality, it is always a curved slope. The line always is not a straight line like this. When you take a longer duration, right, usually the curve will become a straighted line, or it will move towards becoming more and more a straighted line as such. But if you have a detailed study, let's say for a month or 3 months or 6 months, a year, etc., generally these kind of lines will be a curved line like this. Okay, these are the two very important points with respect to the concept of a law of demand, law of a supply, market equilibrium, movement along the curve as well as the shift of the curve.